Welcome to City Cinematheque, where the art and pleasure of the movies are the subject of serious discussion. I'm your host, Jerry Carlson, and I teach film studies at the City College of the City University of New York. Today, it's our pleasure to show the 1935 classic of British and international cinema, The 39 Steps. This is one of the films that announced to the world who was Alfred Hitchcock. He was going to become, if you didn't know before this film, one of the greatest directors in the history of the medium. This is a film that sets the style for the romantic thriller for really from then until today. Joining us as a special guest today to talk about the importance of Hitchcock in this film is himself the distinguished filmmaker, author, and film historian, Peter Bogdanovich. Now, take this moment to thrill to the art and pleasure of Alfred Hitchcock's The 39 Steps. Welcome back to City Cinematheque. I hope you've enjoyed what may be for some of you the first time, or for what some of you may be the 100th time of viewing The 39 Steps, one of the great Hitchcock films, and indeed one of the great romantic thrillers of the entire canon of film history. There's a lot to talk about. We have 30 minutes, and it's our pleasure to welcome back to City Cinematheque the distinguished filmmaker, author, and film historian, Peter Bogdanovich. Good to have you here again, Peter.
Nice to be here again.
Great. You know, you knew Hitchcock rather well, I think. How did that come about? I mean, how did you translate yourself from someone with a deep and profound knowledge of his cinema into someone who was able to interview and get to know him as a filmmaker?
Well, believe it or not, as an infant, as a young fellow, I was entrusted with doing the first Alfred Hitchcock retrospective in the United States, which happened at the Museum of Modern Art here in New York in 1963. And in order to do that, I interviewed Hitch. But I had already met him 2 years before, in 1961, when I was doing a piece for Esquire. And I interviewed him then, and so we became I started my relationship with Hitchcock at that time, and I can't say we became close friends, but we became, you know, I enjoyed a kind of teacher-student relationship with him. And because I had started as a director and actor in the theater, I didn't come on like an academic or a critic, and so he talked to me not like a peer, but certainly he talked to me as somebody in the business. And that was helpful with all my interviews. But he was the greatest teacher of film. He loved to talk about why he did things, how he did them, how he went around things. He was awfully good at instructing. He enjoyed it too, so it was fun.
Well, one of the things that's always struck me is that while obviously he's one of the, technical masters of the medium, he loved talking about how he told stories. That is why he made certain decisions about story incident and character, and how he was positioning how the likes of you and me are going to be thinking and feeling about that character or that incident at that time. So it was always, there's people who talk about things from a technical point of view. Oh, well, I got to do this with the camera on this thing. But when Hitchcock talks, it's always about the relationship between the story he wanted to tell and the technical means he found to do that.
Well, yeah, and he was always directing the audience. He was trying to tell the story in the best way he could cinematically, always thinking about where the audience's emotions were, what they were thinking, and how he could make them think. He used to say he didn't want them to think particularly, he wanted them to feel. And that was what he spent a large part of his time doing. 39 Steps, which he felt, and I agree, was his best English film of the English period, which went from 1925 to 1939. I think 39 Steps is the best of those. It's interesting to see it again today. I saw it recently. And first of all, it's the first Hitchcock film that is the innocent man suspected, accused of a crime, who can't go to the police because they're after him, and so has to solve it himself. He did that 3 times. You think he did it more often, Hitchcock, but he actually only did it 3 times. He did it with the 39 Steps, then he did it a few years later with a picture called Saboteur. Robert Cummings and Priscilla Lane in America. And then the final one, which I think is the best one, is North by Northwest with Cary Grant in 1959. So 39 Steps is the kind of English North by Northwest, you could say.
Absolutely.
With a wonderful, interesting English actor. Both of the good ones had English actors. A Saboteur has some great ideas in it, and it's interesting, but it doesn't quite work because Hitch said Robert Cummings has a comedy face, he said, and it didn't work for him. But Robert Donat, who was one of the great romantic leading men in English cinema, who won an Oscar for Goodbye, Mr. Chips, is wonderful in the picture and really gives it a kind of weight.
One is always told about him that off camera he was, I mean, we know he died very early of asthma, that off camera he was the least robust person one had ever met, that he was genuinely rather sickly and asthmatic, and that is something one would never guess.
No, you'd never guess it from watching him, no.
No, absolutely. There's a complete transformation.
Yeah, very attractive.
Absolutely. Indeed, almost that he becomes the kind of model, I think, for a lot of Americans of what a certain kind of adventurous Englishman of the admirable sort is.
Yes.
Of course, he's playing someone Canadian in this, but...
yeah, for some reason.
Yeah,
I never quite understood why he was Canadian.
Yeah, I never quite get these... He doesn't, there's that one shot in the film, of course, where we see him, it's the shot in the newspaper in which he's in his cowboy gear from from Winnipeg, Manitoba, and you're saying, no. This is a fellow who should be in the tweeds he's wearing in this film. So what else? I mean, this is a signature Hitchcock film. I mean, this.
But it's got so many elements in it that he used later, and what's fun about it, I think, seeing it today, is the kind of innocence of it. Yeah. It has a kind of innocence that I won't say he lost it in America, but it doesn't have, the American films are more technically proficient and more, they don't have any holes in them. Right. Whereas this film has a few little places where you say, well, wait a minute, why would that happen? And there's a little sleight of hand in a couple of places. The first one being when the woman gets killed in his apartment. Why don't they kill him right away too? How'd they get in? How'd they kill her? And how come they don't kill him at the same time? So it's very odd because she's just in the other room. But you just don't ask the question because it's so well done. You kind of get past it. But,
okay, if I could add my own one to that list, it's the 2 bad guys who are in the inn when they're hiding out and they get shushed away by the wife, and you say, well, if these guys are really bad guys, they could find out a way to get back in this inn and see whether those people were there. But the wife just sort of swishes them away, and so the bad guys disappear.
Yeah, it's a little bit quick there.
Yeah,
but that's okay. It works. What Hitchcock told me he liked particularly about the film was the quick switches from one thing to another. He runs away. He goes into that place. They say, "Oh, thank God you've come," and he gives a speech, and then he's out and he's marching along with the Salvation Army band and whatever it is. There's a lot of quick.
Right.
Hitch liked that, and he talked about how that was the challenge and that was the fun of it, and that's hard work. And of course, he did it at its best in North by Northwest.
Absolutely. One of the things that also strikes me about this, that points us backwards towards the younger Hitchcock than this is a truly mature film in every way, is that while this is a definitive Hitchcock film, there's also ways in which you see traces or marks of all the people he was watching and learning from as a very young man in the 1920s.
Well, he was definitely influenced by Fritz Lang and the German cinema. There's no question about that. In fact, he was referred to as the English Fritz Lang when he started out because he was doing crime films, as Lang had done.
Right.
But 39 Steps was, I think, perhaps one of the most popular films of his. It was also highly regarded in America.
Absolutely.
And interesting enough, I remember when I was first writing about Hitchcock in the early 60s, which is, it seems a long time ago now, even then, in the 60s and, you know, into the 70s, people would say, oh, well, you know, the American Hitchcock is nothing compared to the English Hitchcock. There was a kind of a snob attitude. Hitch thought it was partially nostalgia for the English period. But there's no comparison. I mean, I think the American period is much better and much more profound, much technically better, better acted, better structured, everything. However, that said, the 39 Steps is enormously entertaining and again has the cool blonde, which became a Hitchcock trademark, taken to its peak, I suppose, with Grace Kelly. But Madeleine Carroll is
she's pretty
terrific.
You bet.
And those scenes between them, with the wonderful idea of them being handcuffed together. I mean, well, you can't get a better situation, it seems to me, for a romantic crime story than to have the hero and heroine handcuffed together in bed yet.
Right, right.
Which she gets out of rather quickly when she tries to. But that's a terrific thing.
Well, one of the things I also
one of the things Hitch was always amused, he would talk about it, that at the first screening of the film for the press, that one of the major critics for the London Observer was heard to observe that when Madeleine Carroll, you know, sort of has a change of heart,
right,
she gets a blanket and puts it over Robert Donat, and the woman said, "Ah, here we go again, love's young dream." But then she, when she realizes she's cold, Madeleine Carroll, she takes the blanket away and puts it over herself. So it's a funny Hitchcock twist. Well, on the joke,
and is characteristic, as you pointed out, about the way in which he's obsessive. He has obsession with detail, and frequently they're ironic details.
Often ironic. The whole thing is wonderfully. It's done with an enormous amount of energy and wit. And I wonder, did you catch where Hitchcock appeared? It's very hard to catch him in this one, but he is in it.
I didn't this time.
Well, you know, I had to watch it twice to
okay, good. I like that confession.
To make sure that was really him. And I mean, you're not quite sure. I'm pretty sure it was him, though. But after Donut comes out of the music hall and before he gets on the bus, you can see Hitchcock, I think, crossing with a bunch of people, and he throws a candy wrapper on the street.
I think you're right. I think you're right on that. But I think that if that forces people to watch the film again, all the better for everyone. Because
check it out.
Yeah, because this is also one of those films that one of the I think the ironies of the reputation of a film like this is I've been watching this film for decades, and I never tire of this film, as I never tire of certain of his other films, and yet the film has a reputation as being just a light film of some kind, but there's a lot of things going on in it, and one of those things you mentioned a little bit earlier is not just the changes in direction. You know, he's doing one thing or another, but you know, it's a comedy, it's a romantic film, but also it's a frightening film at times as well. The implications of his situation are frightening. It doesn't go, you know, in the same directions, obviously, as a Psycho or a Vertigo that get so dark. But
no, but the thing that I was noticed, having seen M and the 39 Steps rather close to each other, is that where Lang can never be accused of having a tremendous sense of humor. Right. Mordant, yes. Ironic, yes. But not funny. Hitch is funny and has a lightness to him, which is why he became so popular also. There's a kind of a light touch, even in the dramatic, even in the murderous sections. He doesn't beat you over the head with anything. I like that about the picture. It's charming. But of course, it is scary in the sense that you know, he's under a lot of pressure. This guy, under a lot of pressure. It's funny how he spends quite a bit of time on what he used to refer to as the MacGuffin.
Yeah.
And I asked him, I said, what is the MacGuffin? The MacGuffin, he said, is that thing in the picture that the characters are very concerned about. The audience doesn't care at all, which is, in this case, the secret, the munitions or some construction of some kind of bomb or whatever it is that you finally, Mr. Memory gives it to you at the end. But you don't really care about that.
Right.
You care about Robert Donut getting, saving himself and getting hooked up with Madeleine Carroll. But in fact, the MacGuffin is the 39 steps.
Yeah, exactly. But one of the things, since we've talked on an earlier show about M, and some of our viewers have seen it recently as well. One of the things that's very interesting is a kind of comparison and contrast is not just the tone of Lang and in Hitchcock, but this story follows brilliantly, I mean, some of the basic narrative patterns that are at the core of the classical Hollywood cinema, and that is, this poor guy has a terrible problem that he's got to solve, but he's a male professional who's out there who's got to get certain things done to get himself out of the hot water, as it were, and then he becomes involved with a woman along the way. And I mean, Hitchcock always keeps it so interesting, so there's never a cliche about it. It's always fresh.
No, and I love the way he ends it with the handcuffs and the hand holding the hands at the very end, which I thought was a wonderful way of avoiding the kiss. The only kissing is when he grabs her and kisses her against her will.
That's nuts.
I think it's the only kiss in the picture.
No,
when he's kind of just jumps her in the train. But there's the train again, which Hitch used often, again in North by Northwest and Lady Vanishes and so on. It's wonderful. It's wonderful. The enclosure of a train, I think, has a sort of dramatic impact. The blonde, the accused man who can't go to the police because they're after him, and so he has to do it himself. All those elements. I love the moment when he finds the man with the top finger,
yes.
top joint of his little finger missing, and the man says, "You mean like this?" And he holds it up, gets right to it. All the and the quick way he has to jump from one thing to another. It's a terrific picture. It has a lot of charm to it.
When you were interviewing Hitchcock, what did he think of? What he had done? I mean, was he satisfied with all of his work, part of his work? What things did he think, that had worked, as it were, and what things was he dissatisfied with certain?
Well, I felt that he was quite candid about what he didn't like and what he did like. There were certain films he felt the casting ruined the film for him, like Robert Cummings in Saboteur is an example. Or Farley Granger in Strangers on a Train, where he just didn't think the leading man was strong enough. Foreign Correspondent, he complained because he thought Joel McCrea wasn't as strong a leading man as Gary Cooper would have been.
Right.
And so he often felt that he was compromised in his casting, and was thrilled that he got Cary Grant for Suspicion, which was the first time he felt he had a real, leading man that was up to the material. And he felt the reason he got Cary Grant was because Cary Grant was English. And the reason for that is because, and it's true, in England, the crime or suspense thriller is not a despised genre, as it was in America until lately. It was kind of like, like a B picture. It wasn't considered important. And in England, that's not the case. I mean, Agatha Christie was, highly regarded. So it is significant that the first big movie star he got was Cary Grant, and that Cary was English, and then they did 4 pictures together altogether. Yeah. But Hitch was quite candid about what he liked and didn't like. But 39 Steps is one he was quite proud of.
Well, one of the things that strikes me about Hitchcock's career, which there are other directors with a comparable technical expertise, etc., but he's really almost, if not, unique, but in film history, that he's made films of such, charm as North by Northwest and the 39 Steps, that everyone comes away with. You can really say that these are feel-good movies of the very highest order of that as a compliment. I mean, this is managed in every way. And at the same time, particularly in films like Vertigo and Psycho, he made several of the most disturbing films about modern life and about America as an utterly crazy place with this, psychotic cultural underbelly in some way. And he did this within the studio system.
Well, he was very fortunate to have become identified with a particular kind of a kind of movie. So the name Hitchcock became synonymous with suspense, for 4 decades while he was alive, and it still is. You think of Hitchcock, you think of a particular kind of movie,
right.
A Hitchcock movie. Toward the end of his career, he was saying, that he was in competition not only with himself, but with everybody else who was doing Hitchcock kind of movies. But I think he probably is the most famous director in movie history. I suppose Cecil B. DeMille was for a while, but
right.
he's pretty much largely forgotten now, whereas Hitchcock still is a household name. I think one of the reasons is because he had a television series for 11 years where he would host it in his own ironic way. And Hitch was funny.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think the audiences liked him and could identify, well, that's the guy that made that picture. His trademark appearance, which really didn't start happening constantly until the American films. I mean, as I said, you really have to look for him in
right.
39 Steps. But in the American films, it became a bit. And he'd often said he had to get rid of it early on in the picture because otherwise it'd be distracting. Because the audience was waiting
for Hitchcock to appear and not following the storyline.
Yeah. When is he going to come on? I think he comes on right at the beginning of North by Northwest. It's the last shot of the credits, I think.
Absolutely, it's the bus sequence.
Missing the bus.
Right.
But he also he had a charm in life and a kind of twinkle in his eye, mischievous. Kind of sometimes not malicious, but just mischievous, I suppose, like a bad little boy, a kind of twinkle in his eye, and like to pull the rug out from under you.
Right.
And that you feel that in 39 Steps. You feel it in the English films in a way more than in the American films, because he is more innocent. There's a kind of an innocence to some of those films that goes away when he gets more professional.
Yeah. What about Hitchcock? Positive and negative influence. I mean, upon that, because there is a Hitchcockian cinema. Do you think he's been a good example, bad example?
I wish people would pay more attention to what he really did as opposed to what people say he did.
Okay.
He's awfully well structured, and the scenes is not a wasted move. They're very well constructed. His films are generally very well constructed. As I said, I think the construction of his films improves when he gets to America. It gets, I don't want to say slicker, but smoother.
Okay.
And you can see it in 39 Steps. It's not as smooth as North by Northwest, but my God, it was a difference in age too. I mean, experience does count.
Yes, indeed.
For something, and quite a bit. There's also the whole idea of the transference of guilt, which is talked about a lot in Hitchcock's pictures. And does Robert Donat in the 39 Steps feel guilty? And that's part of why he's doing what he's doing, is that he feels guilty for the death of the woman at the beginning because he didn't do enough to try to protect her. And Hitch said he thought that was an element, but the main element, he's trying to save his own skin. It has a lot of, today, I suppose, it isn't anything particular, but in its day, the transitions were very much noted, particularly the famous one when the maid finds the dead body and she turns into the camera and screams, but you don't hear the scream, you hear the sound of the train screaming. That was became a textbook example of brilliant cutting, brilliant transition, you know.
Well, he is one of those directors who, you know, is a great, not only creator, but he's also a great synthesizer. I mean, he's one of those people who, as a young man, studied the people he thought were the masters who were working at that time and, you know, went to the buffet and didn't forget.
Yeah, he also talked about how his films were often compared to American films or to German films being at that period right up there with American films in terms of world cinema. They were the two most popular.
Right.
And he was never considered a, quote, English director, because the English cinema was never considered to be that hot.
Right.
And Hitch really is the least English director in a certain way. His films are very American, or German, I suppose, but the Germans and the Americans influenced each other quite a bit. But he talked about Griffith, D.W. Griffith, and seeing, you know, Orphans of the Storm and watching The Ride to the Rescue and how that impacted. Hitchcock learned how to use inserts, which is the close-up of some, you know, like the finger or the handcuff or those things. He learned a lot of that from Griffith, who was great at that, the dramatic insert. And he learned a lot about technique from American films.
Absolutely. Well, that's also one of the things. You know, there's a lot of talk these days, Peter, about American cinema, domination of markets, etc. But the case has always been that the American cinema, though its subjects may be about us, has always been a global cinema that the people have seen.
I asked Hitch about that once. I said, would you say that the American cinema is the most vital? And he said, oh, yes, worldwide, yes. Why? Well, because America, when you make a film for the United States, you're automatically making it for the whole world. Why? Because America's full of foreigners. Why isn't your name Smith? Why isn't my name Jones? That's what he said.
Wise words from Hitch, and we're going to have to wrap up today with wise words from Hitch. If you'd like to know more about this series, please log on to our website, www.cuny.tv, and you can find a way to communicate with us, or you can find more about the films that will be coming up on City Cinematheque in this series or those to follow. Let me give you that website again. You can log on to www.cuny.tv. Peter, it's always a pleasure to have you here chatting. We're going to be chatting for a couple of more weeks about some other directors, and I very much look forward to it.
Me too. Thanks,
Great.
Jerry. Thank
Super.
you.
Thank you for joining us today, and please come back and join us once again on City Cinematheque while we try to show you some of the riches of the archives of film history. Thanks for joining us today.